He says, over the years, I've heard people use the term dark night, which he's going to use the initials DN to represent, to describe difficulty as a result of their practice. What has been confusing is that I've seen it used to describe everything from a period of relatively mild ennui through to more serious depression or anxiety, or to a profound sense of hopelessness or other existential crisis, and even to seeming psychotic symptoms. Yes, I have, we've all observed that phenomena and the multiplicity of forms it can take, and the very strange things that have been done with it. I'll go ahead and read the rest of your questions, see what more context there is before I start saying anything. I know the term dark night to originate in Christian mysticism, and have also heard you intimate that it has been misappropriated and has no real place in the vocabulary of a meditator. Yet I have seen it increased use and popularity in modern meditation movements, particularly pragmatic Dharma circles. Dr. Willoughby Britton even runs support groups and does research on the phenomenon. Could you explain the dark night in its original context and what, if any, relevance it has to the experiences of Buddhist, TMI, meditators, or other contemplatives? Why does it occur? Is it something that can be avoided? If it is not a real risk for meditators, are there other adverse effects we should be aware of? Is there a more suitable term that we could be using? And a bonus question, what is Zen sickness? Well, okay. Yes. Let me, I'll just say something.
Sorry about that earlier. I did make it, so.
That's great. I'm glad you're here and you're with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, great. So I'm just going to, I just read your question. Yeah, if we look at this, this is something that I would say that Willoughby's work brought this to attention as an adverse effect of meditation. What happened to it subsequently is where it gets really bizarre. I don't know at what point, and I'm not even sure if Willoughby has, in any context other than an informal one, adopted the use of the term dark night. What she identified was something that was very real, and she became aware of it because she experienced it herself. What is that? Well, as a trained researcher, she described it as a phenomenon. She did research. She contacted teachers, and she got information from organizations that led large numbers of meditation retreats. And she discovered that the disturbing, prolonged, and unpleasant experiences that she had gone through as a result of her meditation practice, that there were many people that had had something similar to that. When I say many, I mean, it's like she just didn't find a scattered instance here and there. She found that with each, the larger the organization and the more activity a teacher had been engaged in, the more instances of this that they experienced. What was it that she was talking about? And I know, at least in her earlier presentations of this, and I haven't followed closely what she's saying since then. I think her groundbreaking work was the important part. She's describing this as an adverse effect of meditation in the context of Western meditators, primarily in the United States. She did not extend it beyond that. What happened, it seemed, is that this idea caught on as a popular meme. I guess everybody's familiar with the term meme. Okay. It's something like, a meme is sort of like it behaves sort of like a gene, but actually much more like a virus. Somewhere halfway between the two. So, and I think the co-opting of the term dark night to attach to the adverse meditation experience that Willoughby was bringing to much larger attention contributed enormously to that meme going viral, right? Now, this is a very real phenomenon, and people who had experienced something like that, or who had known somebody who experienced something like that, of course, would be able to relate to it. Now, as with anything like that, the problem goes where you take a piece of information, which is a systematically and scientifically derived piece of information. You take it out of context, you elaborate it, you make it into all kinds of fanciful things that it isn't. You attach it to all kinds of different things. The worst thing about it is that it was very quickly made into an essential part of the path of insight and awakening, which it absolutely is not, never was, never could be, okay? Having done so, you realize the effect this has. You have a meme, and now it's become super toxic. It's become a toxic meme, to the degree that you are vulnerable to being infected by this meme, and to the degree which you aspire to insight and awakening, and you're dedicating yourself to these practices, your likelihood of experiencing this has increased by some huge, I mean, I couldn't put a number to it, but it's like 100,000-fold more likely to happen, even within the context of the causes and conditions. So now, on top of this being a phenomenon that is known and has been demonstrated to occur in a particular population of meditators, all of a sudden this has been made a universal phenomenon. It's been made one to be expected, even looked forward to, but also anticipated with fear and trembling. Oh, all of the dynamics, the melodrama, everything is there, right? Yeah.
Well, you bring
Fear
up
and trembling. Yeah.
sorry, you bring up a really interesting point. When I was originally drafting my question and I posted it, and for some other reason my question disappeared, but I had put in that it almost seems like it's an expected part of the meditator's journey now.
It's been into that.
Particularly in the pragmatic Dharma circles, and everybody's like, oh, you're just going through your dark night, as if that's just something everyone goes through, right?
That's right. And so there's a variety of results of this. Somebody can put themselves in a total crisis because of this. They get caught up in the melodrama of it. Other people, maybe more grounded people, they don't do that, but they have this expectation, well, this is something that if I'm successful in this, this is an indication of my success in the meditation process. So therefore, I must find that. Okay, and so they look at their experience, and this is where, in the first part of your question, you said it covers this huge range. But we have people going into bona fide crisis. We have people unnecessarily throwing themselves into bona fide crisis. We have people trying to find something in their experience that corresponds to this in order to validate their own practice and their own progress. And that's why I described this as a really toxic idea in the form that it's taking. First, let's go back to the context. We look at this objectively. This is something that happens in Western meditators. Okay, are these people all doing the same practice? Well, there's a really strong overlap between the practice that they're doing and the likelihood of having these kinds of experiences. The first question that should arise is, in the 2,500 years of history of this practice, has this been a widespread phenomenon? Well, you look where you want and you won't find it. You can find things that are part of legitimate traditions. Zen Sickness and Lung in the Tibetan practice. These are referring to specific things with specific causes and specific remedies. Now, okay, so there is something that kind of resembles this traditionally, but it seems to be comparatively rare, and it's not considered something that everybody is going to experience. It's just one of the things that some people might have to be guided through. So this should have raised some very legitimate questions about what was happening with this idea in the West. The most important question is, if this is such a widespread phenomenon, even like Willoughby's research absolutely was not indicating that everybody went through this or that everybody that achieved insight went through this. She was just saying there's a significant number of people that are affected like this, and damn it, we should be aware of it, and we should try to understand it and be prepared to deal with it. That's all well and good. That's great. She's right on. You know, I agree with her totally. She wasn't implying all of this other stuff that has been later generated in response to this. If we look at the historical tradition, the first thing we realize, this is something that is pretty much unique to American meditators, and by extension to greater or lesser degrees. As the meme spreads, especially, it's like it goes from being unheard of to all of a sudden it's happening everywhere. It needs to be looked at in that context and questions asked. And the most important question is, well, what's different about what these Western meditators are doing? And where might this idea of unpleasant experiences have arisen from? Well, the form in which meditation arrived large scale in the West was various derivatives of the Mahasi noting method. And Mahasi was an exponent of a method that developed in the late 19th century amongst the forest traditions of Southeast Asia. It had its roots in things that went back much further, but its modern form was primarily developed as a part of Buddhist modernism, the reaction to colonial influences in Southeast Asia. And Mahasi, the foremost exponent of it, and then subsequently it was U Pandita who took his place. What they were developing this on, the historical route that they drew on as the basis of, and then subsequently to validate their presentation, was Buddhaghosa's Visuddhimagga. And so the first thing you want to look at is, okay, we have a lot of variants of Mahasi method that were introduced into Western practice. And this is this is the primary location in which, until the meme spread and started to affect much larger number of people, this is where the serious researcher, Willoughby Britton, found the evidence for this phenomenon that she felt the world needed to be aware of and we needed to study and understand. So let's look at that more closely and its antecedents. When you carefully compare what Mahasi says to what Buddhaghosa says, they are not the same. You can see how what Mahasi says can be easily translated into a traumatic experience. But even there, to carry it into something that goes on for weeks or months or years, disrupts people's lives and things like that, that's not in Mahasi either. So this is something that is progressively developed. What Mahasi did was took Buddhaghosa's description of the realizations that a person had, of the fearful nature of basically all objects of perception when you treat them in a very inappropriate way, which is what most people do, which is why we suffer in the world. To realize the fearful nature of doing that and to be horrified by it and to be so glad that you understand that you just temporarily, you're disenchanted with all of that. But the problem is not that you're overwhelmed by fear, because Buddhaghosa says, you do not experience fear as fear. It's the knowledge of the fearfulness of these things when misperceived. It's the horror of realizing this is where all of your suffering has come from. This is not some new kind of suffering brought about by this realization. It's realizing the horror that you've been living in because of this, and that everyone else is living in because of this. These are the knowledges, these are the understandings, these are the glimpses of wisdom that are leading to enlightenment in Buddhaghosa. I'm not sure why Mahasi did what he did, but for whatever the reason, he had the meditator in terror and in horror. And the disenchantment, which is part of the liberation, when you realize that the reason your hand hurts is because you're gripping a hot poker, you let go of it, right? So why he had his meditators described as experiencing not a knowledge of the nature of these things, but rather as having experientially these negative emotions. But Mahasi doesn't make that into a months-long, years-long. Disenchantment doesn't become total depression, disillusionment, inability to function in life. Terror doesn't become extreme anxiety, inability to sleep, and disturbances in every aspect of somebody's life. This is all stuff that has happened because of this Western development of a popular meme influenced by a whole lot of things. So what I would have to say is, and just there's two things. First of all, in my experience, whoa, I never saw this happening. And since then, I haven't seen this phenomenon that's been popularized happening. But not only that, I look back at the traditions and see if there was something that was happening that I missed, and I don't find it. It's not there. You can distort Lung, and you can distort Zen sickness, and you can say, we'll see, they already knew about this. This is not if you look carefully. Not at all. No. That's something quite different, and it's something that's easily dealt with, and it's recognized. Okay. What else real corresponds to this? Well, it is a shocking experience to have how you had always perceived the world turned upside down. It's a shock. It's like a bucket of cold water. It's disconcerting. It takes a little while to get your bearings and get grounded again. Does it take weeks and months? Do you lose your job and your relationships become no, because of it? No, not at all. Not at all. It's like a bucket of cold water. You get over a bucket of cold water pretty quickly. Yeah, there can be a series of buckets of cold water, and the subsequent shocks aren't particularly less than the first one was, even though you've been through it before. But they don't last long.
A bucket of water wakes you up. I said a bucket of water wakes you up.
It does, exactly.
Yeah, and also a disenchantment. I mean, I really like that word, disenchantment. Is not a pleasant experience, but it's considered, when you look back on disenchantment or disillusionment, it's something that you are grateful for, and that,
Yes.
you know, is a good thing, even though the process itself isn't pleasant, right?
Yeah, it's almost following right on top of it is, oh my God, could this really be true? And thank God I know about
Thank
it.
God I figured it out.
Yeah,
Yeah, I dodged a
thank God I
bullet there.
figured it out. That's right. That's right. They're inextricable to each other.
Yeah.
They really are. So why are these more serious things happening? Well, if we look at the bucket of cold water experience, what would keep somebody with their head stuck in that bucket of cold water instead of having it emptied over their head? Because they're clinging to the bucket of cold water. That's what it is. They're doing their own waterboarding. Uh, yeah. But what are they clinging to? Well, the Eightfold Path just works multidimensionally in so many ways to loosen the attachment to self, to bring about incrementally in many, many different ways, an understanding of what is the real nature of the self and what is there to be clinged to in it. Where do these compulsions that seem such an inevitable and even necessary part of our lives, these compulsions of desire and aversion, come from? Um, if are they really dispensable? Can they be overcome? Things like that. Okay. If you have an ongoing cumulative experience through a, a whole integral practice, you know, practicing every aspect of the Eightfold Path, when you arrive at the point of the bucket of cold water, it's a relief to be beyond that. If you are still fiercely clinging to some notion of self, if you haven't loosened somewhat your enslavement to desire and aversion are going to kick in. The aversion is, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. And the desire is I've got to escape. How can I escape? Um, we see this in the Mahasi tradition practiced in the East. The rolling up the mat phenomenon. People who follow Mahasi closely, and very often they get to the knowledges that have been turned into this dark night phenomenon. And it is difficult. Because their practice hasn't really prepared them previously to see through a lot of the illusory attachments to self, they feel like they're losing something very real. At a gut level, how are they responding? The emotional brain, the reflexive brain, all of the parts of the mind that operate in, they learn, but they learn in a conditioned way. They set up strong patterns of reaction based on past events. all of this is in the world of being a separate self. And that is undermined. If all at once, if you haven't progressively learned, you've seen through the illusion of that, then that can be, that's the attachment to the bucket of cold water. You're attached to the self at the same time that the self has become incomprehensible in the way that you knew it. That can create a difficult thing. And this is the closest thing I think that I could find uh, in the method that was producing so much of this in the West, in its origins in the East, was the rolling up of the mat stage, where often the meditator would say, okay, I just can't do this anymore. Roll up the mat, say they're at some monastery in the Thailand or Burma or something like that. Go to the nearest cities, eat food, go to entertainments, for that matter, sex, drugs, rock and roll, whatever it is. Let me get back to normal. Let me try to shake this thing that I went through. Yeah. So a large part of what made this meme so viral and popularized it was the co-opting of the term dark night. John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila make reference to something that, well, dark night, the dark night of the spirit is what John of the Cross talked about. What made this a dark night is he had always felt the presence of God. And now he couldn't find that present. This is very, very well described also in, her name just, so the modern Catholic monk who wrote about the same thing. Anyway, no, modern, not monk, nun, Catholic nun, Bernadette Roberts. Yeah, she writes in detail about this. There's this whole period of that where the duality of God, the loving Father, the lover was there. John was in romantic thrall with being able to be in the presence of the lover all of the time. The dark night was when the lover was gone. He couldn't find, he likened it to searching in a dark night for the lover, which he would occasionally find. And the sweetness of that made the absence of that even more poignant. Where was this leading? This was leading to what we would call a realization of non-duality. There's a great illustration of that in a little modern parable, Christian parable. Man dies, goes into the presence of God, reviews the history of his life, and it's like footsteps in the sand on the beach. And he says, God, I see all these times where you were beside me. There were two sets of footsteps in the course of my life, and you were there with me. But what about these times? The times that I needed you most, and you weren't there. There's only one set of footsteps in those times. And God answers him and says, my son, those are the times I was carrying you. Right? This is what John's experience of the dark night. It was that realization he had to let go of his attachment to the duality in order to attain what he wanted all along, which was complete union with the other, with the lover. And I think we can all relate to this. Anybody that's ever been in a very close relationship with somebody else, you want to merge and become one with that other, but it's never possible. But it's like, it's the aspiration, and to whatever incremental degree that's achieved, it's enormously satisfying. But in the case of two individuals, that's not going to happen. In the case of the ultimate, of which we are all a part, from which we arise, and to which we will return, and that we are never apart from in any sense. There is not that duality. And that is actually what we seek, is the realization of that. John's Dark Night is this beautiful, beautiful story of the disappearance of the lover, the fleeting encounters, re-encounters with the lover, and the pain, the repeated pain of that loss, but the ultimate joy and fulfillment of realizing, you know, like the guy in the footsteps on the sand, oh, that's when I see the real truth. I'm never separate from God. And I'm more separate from God when I feel like God as a separate entity is walking beside me. Nothing at all like the way Dark Night is used now. It's not this poignant, painful, but beautiful, exquisitely beautiful experience. It's just, all it is painful, destructive, everything else. The problem with it is that if the kind of practice you're doing does not adequately prepare you for the insights to come, it's going to make it that much more difficult to let go of your attachments and surrender to this new knowledge and understanding. You're going to be in kind of a dilemma and a quandary for a while. This is not a characteristic of the path of awakening. This is a side effect of a limited and inadequate approach to preparation in the whole process. If you try to do everything through meditation, you're going to be missing out on a lot. There was an eightfold path. It wasn't a threefold path. Right effort, right samadhi, and right sati. No, it was not. It was an eightfold path. You cannot ignore. You can't even downplay any of the other 5 parts of the path and not expect something to be problematic as a result of it.
So I think that really answered nearly all my questions really well. Thank you. So there's essentially what you're saying is the Mahasi method has sort of taken out and distorted one part of the Eightfold Path through its particular method, and then that's been further misinterpreted by Western practitioners.
Well, Western practitioners have really run with this.
Yeah.
Western practitioners drawn to any meditative school, Zen, Tibetan, Chinese, no matter what it is, what tradition it comes from, they all want to do the same thing. Let's cut to the chase. Meditation, that's what we have to do. Yeah, the rest, that's all nice, and when I have a little time I might look at it and dabble with it, but we're going to do this all through meditation. Sorry, Lama, but can you just tell me how to do the technique? All this other stuff you're saying is right, and I don't mind sitting here and listening to you. Sorry if I doze off a bit, but I'm just waiting for you to get to the important part. Give me the transmission and show me how to do the practice.
Okay.
Right.
So what with TMI though? TMI is just a book on meditation, or on the surface at least it seems to be. So why is this not happening to TMI practitioners? Or at least, on the Reddit forums, there are people who are saying, oh, but I'm having a dark night experience and they're practicing TMI. But so your book specifically only really teaches meditation. Why is it not happening to TMI meditators then, in the same way that people who are doing so-called Vipassana practices are having these dark night experiences?
The way it can be avoided by using TMI, and many people do avoid it using TMI, is to actually follow the instructions of TMI. Because in in the very first stages, well, in stage 2, how much emphasis is put on you are not in control of your mind. Even in the overview chapter, you can't make anything happen. Get over it. All you can do is form an intention. This becomes developed later on to what does form an intention mean? Well, as a subset of when you form an intention, it just means that there is a temporary subset of subminds within the mind system that are holding a similar intention. And that is the quote you that is going to influence what happens in your mind during your sit. You know, holding an intention is all you can do. You can't even raise your arm because all you can do is intend. And if all the neural and muscular and joints, all the other apparatus is in working condition, your arm will raise. Somebody puts their hand on top of your arm will not raise, you know, or if any part of the mechanism along the way is not working, your arm will not raise. All you can ever do is form intentions. You are not in control of your mind. Any one part of your mind might wear the big hat that says I temporarily, but it'll soon be displaced. All these things, this is developed throughout the language and throughout the presentation all the way along. Let go of the idea of I as doer. As you get farther along, there's many different ways in which you have the opportunity to get rid of I as the perceiver, as the experiencer. In other words, you should, if you really read TMI and follow the instructions, if you pick it up and you say, oh yeah, well, I'm already farther along in this, and the only difference in this is that I'm going to be paying attention to a fixed object. You know, it's like you will have skipped the most important things that are going to help you when the time comes. That on a lot of the most important material is in the appendices, and in particular, the appendix on the mindful review. If you've practiced the mindful review the way it's described, and not skim over it and jump to the conclusion that you know what this is about, then what is inevitably going to happen is desire and aversion are going to have much, much less influence on how you react. Your emotional responses to the experiences that you have and the actions that you might take in response to them. You are going to have conditioned yourself to be much, much less attached to the notion of the I as some sort of concrete reality. Throughout TMI, in many, many ways, there are all these things that they're just directing you in the right direction. How did it come to be that way? Well, you see, I wrote TMI before this toxic meme had been developed and started to spread. I was aware of the problematic nature of a lot of Western meditation, because the reason that I started teaching meditation was people started coming to me and then they would talk to me about their practice, and I discovered they'd been practicing for 20 years and they were beginners. I recognized the more people I talked to, the more I recognized that although meditation was rapidly growing in popularity, they were missing 90% of what the whole path was about. Well, not 90%. Let's do it. We'll put it 5/8. They're missing 5/8 of what this practice was really all about. And so I did have that awareness. I didn't feel, the term dark night just emerged, and it wasn't really a serious problem. It was a valid revelation. You see, when Willoughby Britton was going through her own, what you might call a dark night experience, I talked to her, and she was one of the people that I learned from as, oh my God, yeah, and I see exactly how this could happen. It's terrible, this shouldn't happen. I hadn't really directly, personally encountered anybody who had something like that before Willoughby. right? So I did have enough awarenesses of it to throw in and address a little bit of it in the final chapters. This was just final preparation, getting ready for print. But nevertheless, I had incorporated into what was primarily a meditation manual because I knew that meditation by itself, without some other instruction, without some other guidance, um, just giving people meditation techniques and incentives to follow it wasn't going to necessarily give them the kinds of realizations and understanding that should come from simply just doing the meditation practice. You don't notice that there's no one in charge of your mind unless somebody points it out to you. If nobody points it out to you, you can discover that the way I did after a long time. But you might not discover it at all, or you might discover it but not articulate it in a way that allows you to apply that concept effectively to a variety of situations.
So what would be your advice to someone like Willoughby when she came to you, or someone who's going through this really unpleasant and prolonged experience? How would you help them course correct, for lack of a better term?
Yeah. Well, in TMI, of course, I give some guidelines to how to avoid that. I did make that explicit, 5 different points in one place. But what do you do when somebody's in it? Well, what I encouraged Willoughby to do was to try to move out of this mindset that she was trapped in. I encouraged her to do samatha practice. That was a big part of what was lacking for her. I encouraged her, I encouraged her, and I would encourage, I'm not going to speak about Willoughby anymore. Because I don't know to what degree she even paid attention to what I advised her to do. But
right. So hypothetically, you would encourage such a person to start doing a shamatha practice.
They've got to get normalized. They got to get grounded again. And once they're grounded again, then they've got to be able to start approaching these things that are problematic to them in from this grounded place and in a more the word that comes to mind, I don't know if it's the best word, is holistic, in a more holistic way. Maybe in a more integrated way, rather than isolating it at one thing and it has to be either negative or positive, right? But rather as, anyway, complex, holistic phenomenon. A big part of it is that when you start to be in this space of realizing how different reality is from what you thought it was, all kinds of, and everyone, as far as I can tell, has all kinds of residue of past traumas, emotional, psychological, all kinds. They can take so many different forms, but they leave their mark. And this is the kind of, this unresolved stuff, these internal contradictions, these problematic things that somehow have just been part of everything that's been going on, they emerge, they come to the front, and their full effect becomes known. Most people that are in some kind of a dark night absolutely must have some kind of psychological therapy to help them. I wouldn't advise anybody to try to work through this on their own. Get some help. That's one part of it. But in terms of your practice, do the kinds of practices that are going to get you grounded again, that are going to get you back into positive, and then return to your practices from a place that will help you to regain some kind of understanding that eluded you along the way. It was there, and it played a role in your being able to progress through the stages. Now, when I say this, I don't care what practice anybody was doing. They're going to go through these same stages. You know what I mean? This is a little digression. No matter what practice you do, you are going to experience mind wandering and forgetting and gross distraction and subtle distractions long before, and it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what you're using as a meditation object. It doesn't matter whether it's fixed. It doesn't matter whether it's constantly changing. Mind wandering is when you forget what you're doing and you do something else for a long period of time. Forgetting is where you forget what you're doing. It doesn't matter whether it's a single pointed attention to one thing, single pointed attention to a non-changing object, single pointed attention to a changing object like the breath, or single pointed attention to many different objects as they rise and pass away. Stability of attention is stability of attention, and there's no way around it. So I'm not talking stages of TMI when I say stages. No matter what practice you do, go back and review your progress through the stages and learn how your mind works. That was the part that nobody pointed out to you, and that would have saved you a lot of this trauma. That now, how many of the people who experience a dark night now would have experienced a dark night if they hadn't been primed to do so, if it hadn't been popularized, if they hadn't read dozens of accounts on Reddit and elsewhere, if they hadn't had teachers stand up in front of a group and pontificate on it? Well, I'll tell you, the number would be enormously less. But the problem would remain the same.
But one thing that you did say, though, however, so thank you. I think you've really covered that well. But the one thing that you did say, and this will be my last question to you, is that there are real, like, adverse effects that some people might have that Willoughby did pick up on. And so, what are those, and can like what's happening with that, and can that be avoided? Can that what would one do with those?
To the degree that you know what potential problems are, forewarned is forearmed. That helps a lot. To the degree that you understand what those problems arise from, then you're that much better equipped to, knowing that they're a possibility, understanding what they come from, understanding their nature. If they do begin to arise, you're much better equipped to do something about it. Okay. To the degree that you know not only that these things can happen and why they happen, if you understand how, and I'll give the credit back to the Buddha, that you can understand how the system was actually set up to preclude this thing happening in such a serious and dramatic way. If you have that knowledge and can apply it, then you have the remedy. And the sooner the remedy is applied, then the less the problem will be. It would be best that you knew about the potential problem, that you understood how it developed, and that you implemented the remedy from the very first day you sat on the cushion. That's ideal. But if you didn't, it's never too late.
Okay. And so, sorry, I swear, very last question. Is there a term that you would think is probably better for us to use, like for that sort of pseudo dark night that people are having, just to not conflate it with what the original term meant?
That would be a really useful thing to do. Yeah, it would be. I think, and now it occurs to me, an alternative term might be the best way to break the current logjam.
Right. Yeah.
A countervailing meme of a much healthier sort, a less toxic sort.
I know Elizabeth has said that, or I don't know whether I heard this from you, Elizabeth, or not, but Shinzen did use the pit of the void, but that also sounds pretty dramatic to me, and very melodramatic, and might have a similar kind of effect. So
I would say the shock of realization, but I'd want people to understand it's the bucket of cold water kind of shock. It's not having your arms and legs cut off kind of shock.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that was really helpful.
It's a shock of realization. And there's lots of parables that illustrate how shocking it can be, but how short it can be. You have the tiger chasing you. There's a cliff. You can't even see the bottom. What do? You jump. You jump and you discover that you can fly. but you don't know till you jump. But it's all over really quickly. Or either you lay down and let the tiger consume you, and you discover that something totally different results from the tiger consuming you than what you thought would. It's the same way with jumping off the cliff. You discover something very different happens. You thought you'd crash to the bottom and be disintegrated. Instead, you find you can fly. There's a lot of these metaphors and parables that convey adequately the short-term, intense shockingness of this experience. Inevitable that will happen once you have a context where this is made an essential part of the path, and therefore I need to have it. I need to have something that corresponds it to validate my practice.
I think that covered a lot of important ground, because I think the main thing is that a lot of people who are coming to a meditation practice are already experiencing great suffering and unhappiness and all of that thing. And when they see, oh, I'm going to have to go through this dark night as part of my practice, that could really, like, I'm messed up enough. I don't need that as well, right? Yeah, so which is why I think it's really important to disabuse people of this idea that that is something that you will and must go through. It doesn't mean that you won't go through some unpleasant experiences or sort of shocking experiences in the very short term, but the benefit will be so great. It's like taking a nasty tasting medicine. It might taste bad for a second, but it could save your life, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, Ricardo.
Hi, hi everyone. What's not clear to me in this conversation is what kind of adversities are normal or expected in a TMI practitioner. Like where does it become exaggerated, or maybe is it normal that a TMI practitioner will have no adversity at all, or I don't know, is a period of a couple of weeks of confusion and normal, something that people could expect, maybe, or maybe not?
To expect, well, first of all, what is normal is if you're allowing, if the meditation is really working in all dimensions as it should, you are going to experience, well, you're going to experience those purifications, and those can seem pretty traumatic, and they can last a while, and they can even be severe enough that you might have to seek a therapist's help, something like that. This is a very real part of the journey. It has absolutely nothing to do with dark night. It precedes the ability to assimilate insight to the degree that you achieve awakening. It precedes it by a long time. If you practice properly and it gets dealt with in its own right, it is unpleasant. It is shocking. It can go on for a long time, but you're just dealing with your own shit. You're coming in contact with what's been buried, and it's good. It's all to the good. There's nothing bad about it except the way it feels at the time. And the only terrible thing about it would be if because of it you backed away and you were afraid to face yourself, right? The other thing that you need to expect, this is about seeing that reality is nothing at all like you had expected, that all the assumptions that you had lived by your whole life up to this realization are mistaken, have created as many problems as they have allowed you to function in the world. You know, and this is what the insights are. They are every insight turns upside down an assumption you live by. Anatta, you've always just totally been this self in a world of other. Anicca, you had been one thing amongst many, and your life was a process of this thing that was you interacting with and bumping up and trying to control all these other things. And all of a sudden, there are no things, and that was an illusion, and you never could have succeeded anyway. And to the degree that you thought you might have succeeded in manipulating the world around you, it was an illusion. And yeah, of course, it's going to fall apart sooner or later. All of the insights, I mean, the insight into suffering is just the realization of where your suffering comes from. You know, the first two noble truths is what that is. The dukkha, the insight into dukkha, interconnectedness, that this whole idea of separateness or the ability to operate and function independently and successfully and being able to achieve that. Emptiness, the illusion that you had a pretty good idea of what was going on in this world. And if you could just get it, you can just get all the pieces together, you could control what happened to you. You could control it. What could be more dramatically turning your world inside out than those realizations that everything you'd ever believed to be true and the basis for everything you'd ever said and done was false? That's shocking. That's just one hell of a bucket of cold water. But you should have arrived at that place equipped with everything you need to assemble a new model of reality where emptiness and impermanence or process, where interconnectedness, where no separate self, where understanding how you make your own suffering, all of these knit together in a whole new and much better way of understanding things. So, you know, that's getting over the shock of the bucket of cold water. If you haven't arrived equipped with any of this understanding, then it's going to be really hard for your mind to figure out how to put these new truths together in a way that you can go forward. So you do need to expect that. But if you know it's coming and if you know what it is and why it is, then, or if your teacher knows what it is and why it is, you shouldn't have to experience it that severely. It's always going to be a shock, but the shock should be immediately followed by, oh my God, yes, this is wonderful. This is so much better. I'm so glad.
So there's the two kinds of things maybe that can be separated. There's purification and there's the shock of insight.
That's right.
And maybe, yeah, maybe many people, when they talk about the dark night, they are actually talking about the purifications.
Yes, they are. Many of them are talking about purifications. Yeah. And many others have arrived at this place of undoing their previous understanding, but having been given no scaffolding to build a new understanding out of that.
Is that new scaffolding something conceptual?
Yes, but it's not entirely conceptual. But the conceptual part of it is extremely important. If you don't, right understanding is the first of the Eightfold Path, and that's all conceptual, right? That's all understanding these different ideas, right understanding. The second part of the cognitive, of the Eightfold Path, the first is intellectual, it's cognitive. The second is cognitive. It's how your understanding affects your perception, your reactions, your intentions. By bringing this powerful, new, and different intellectual understanding to your life experience, it should then lead naturally to it changing your thoughts and views and intentions in progressively more and more of every single interaction you take place in the world. This is taking it beyond the purely intellectual and conceptual understanding into more of an experiential reality. You apply this. Now you apply it and you're given some guidelines: right speech, right action, right livelihood. These are some guidelines to work with, some tools to work with in order to much more fully incorporate this. Now, in order to appropriately exercise the second limb of the Eightfold Path and the third, fourth, and fifth, you cannot do this unless you have learned the ability to apply effort in the correct way. Joyful effort, the effort that leads to illumination and understanding. You have to have brought your attention into control. You can't do this from a place of mind wandering and hours of mindless mind chatter, because everybody else is already in that place and they don't get there at all. You know, you have to have stability of attention. You have to have this, you have to have developed this metacognitive awareness. You have to have begun to explore your mind, because after all, this is all about what's happening in your mind. The illusion is that it was all about what's happening in a world around you, right? Without that sati there, without that metacognitive awareness, you're at a dead end. If you only practice samasamadhi and samasati, you're going to get yourself in trouble. All of the other 5 parts of the Eightfold Path are absolutely essential to being able to make the transition from realizing that the way you thought things were is not the way they are, to having a whole new and better understanding of how things really are. Now, it's not, you don't get there, that's not the end of the road. I mean, even the Buddha described it as happening in 4 stages, right? 4 paths. So what does that mean? You reach the first path and you have a much better understanding of the way things are. You reach the second path, and now it's exponentially better understanding than what you had at first path. You reach third path, and I think the exponent has gone from being squared or cubed to being to the 47th power. And then you get to the fourth path, and once again, it is such a superior understanding of the way things are, of yourself and the world and your relationship to it, that it just goes so far beyond what you had as a stream enterer or a second path or third path. And there's corresponding shocks at these, but you know, you've been through it before and now you know where it comes from. So, you know, when the tiger's chasing you this time, you gleefully leap off the cliff. You don't like the tiger chasing you, but you know what to do. You've done it before. Doesn't mean that the primal parts of you aren't screaming out, no, 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 don't do it. But you do it anyway without even a hesitation, because you know. Yeah. It's like after your 100th parachute jump, your heart no longer climbs into your throat at the moment of stepping out of the airplane.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I hope that's helpful. I have had an opportunity to say a lot of the things that I've wanted to say about the dark night for a long time. I'm really, really concerned about what's happening. I care about all these people that are suffering unnecessarily. I care about all these people that are really aspiring to true insight and true awakening, and that we're this unfortunate, but I mean, this is the way life in the world is, but it's unfortunate, but there has developed this particular phenomenon. It's doing a lot of harm. And, you know, other than trying to speak out against it, which I haven't done much of, but I know nothing else to do. It's a real problem. I wish this weren't happening, and I'll try to do whatever I can to change that. I don't know whether I'll succeed, and hey, it doesn't matter. I'll try. But thank you, Juno, for giving me the opportunity to just address these things and hopefully have some people hear what my thoughts are on these.